It's The Executive Edge with Sue Firth. The podcast that gives you an edge in life and business with practical skills that you can apply to achieve and maintain success.
Welcome everyone to this week's episode of The Executive Edge. Now, I am Sue Firth and this is a podcast for the skills in life and business. And today, all the way in from the US, I have Scott Great. Scott, it's a real pleasure. Thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, likewise, Sue. Excited to have this conversation.
Yeah, thank you. So you are in a really great place. So we laughingly call it New York, but actually it's got nothing to do with central New York, as in New York City, but it's in the state, isn't it? So it's really, you're really quite high up, aren't you? Between Syracuse and somewhere else, I think?
Yeah, you got it. Between Syracuse and Albany, which is the state capital. Everybody here in the States as well, when we leave New York and I say I'm from New York, they assume New York City. I'm about 3.5 hours north of New York City, closer to Canada, actually, in the Adirondack Mountains. Beautiful place to live. 3 stoplights, so definitely not a city. Small market, and but it's home, and we love it.
Oh, and it sounds beautiful. It really does. And I think that's another thing we underestimate, because obviously if you've ever been over to the UK, we are proportionately tiny in comparison with the size of your whole country. It's just extraordinary. So tell us a bit more about you, because obviously what I've been able to do in terms of looking you up is this really, you run so many expertise. I mean, you're a TEDx speaker, you've got coaching in your background, you're an entrepreneur, you've started so many businesses. Tell me a bit more about you.
Yeah, absolutely. But I want to start with you because psychologist is actually on my bucket list.
Oh, is it?
And we can maybe dive into this later in the conversation. But truly, I mean that the mental piece of business is so important. The mental piece of anything, but in business, it's such a challenge to stay even keel, right? We can't let the highs get too high and the lows get too low, and we're not as good as people are telling us we are when things are going well, and we're not as bad as we tell ourselves when things aren't going well. And so it's this whole mental battle that we all face. So I loved your bio and background with what you're doing with the psychology piece of this.
Thank you.
But my background is I grew up very poor. I was in a below middle class family for sure, and parents worked hard, but blue collar, and no one in my family ever went to college. And, I just had this mentality of do as good as you can to get through school and then go get a job in the factory and work your 9 to 5 and be able to put food on the table and die. That was my plan.
Quite.
But fortunately, somewhere along the way, I ran into some really good coaches and mentors through school and sports and was able to pursue a bachelor's degree. And then when I got out, I chased money, and I was in the real estate market. I was in the mortgage industry. I did very well in both, working for other companies, one of them actually being HSBC, based out of the UK. And then when the '08 financial meltdown occurred, the HSBC, that I'll never forget, the CEO was sitting in London, and we had a conference call. We knew what was coming, but he said that the sun is setting on North America, and then he got rid of 6,500 of us with one swipe of the pen. Yeah, so it's listen, when a window closes, a door opens, and I was at a point, because the real estate bubble kind of occurred here in the States in 05, 06, and I was a victim of that. And then I got into mortgages and did very well. And then the financial crisis followed the real estate bubble, and I was a victim of that. And I said, you know what? I want to do my own thing. And I always had this entrepreneurial spirit. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I didn't know how to be a business owner. But I knew I wanted to live that dream, if you will, of owning your own business and pursuing your own goals and dreams. And so I got into insurance and opened my first insurance agency with no insurance experience, no business experience in 2009. I had no customers. I was my first customer and started this grinded out approach that has taken me all over the place, all great places over the past 15 years. And so, yeah, along the way, I discovered that, like me, there's a lot of people that pursue entrepreneurship and specifically in the insurance world with really good intentions, but they don't know how. And so, right around 2017, I opened a coaching consulting company for insurance agents to help them avoid a lot of the same mistakes I made out of
Well
the
done.
gate. And yeah, so it's led to what I love doing, which is just educating and training and speaking and building relationships. Writing, wrote my first book, Insurance Agency Optimization, which did very well. It's boring as hell for anyone who's not in insurance, but it's then led me to my most recent book, which is called Referrals Done Right, and it's really all about optimizing relationships so that you don't have to rely on high ticket marketing and advertising. And you just create this infinite pipeline of people who want to introduce you to people they know. And so that's it in a nutshell.
Yeah, well done. And I think though this is actually quite interesting because there's probably several aspects to that. First of all, I think what you have taught yourself, sadly through rather traumatic means, is a level of resilience. It comes from that process of being exposed to something that you truly want, but which you get taken away from you, and then you pull yourself up again. You have to try again. You've got to find something else that you were equally good at. Now, the theme, without doubt, is sales, but what you probably weren't particularly aware of at the time is, hey, I should go into sales, because most people would see sales as being really that typical kind of car sales or something which is forecourt based. And, if you're intellectual, capable and willing to own something, in fact, you could go straight into entrepreneurship. But again, it's quite risky. It's scary. It's can I do it? Then you have to really persevere. That's quite hard work. I'm not implying no one's ready for hard work, but you kind of want results quickly, and entrepreneurship doesn't always come with results really quickly. And then you have a load of life lessons to learn, which is, how do I scale? How do I grow this? How do I do it beyond just bringing in enough to break even? So there's really quite a lot that you probably absorbed or learnt, not just about you, but about the business of business, without even realizing that you knew quite a lot. At that point, you jumped and went, okay, I'm going to now start doing it myself.
Yeah, it's so much to unpack there. And I'll also add on top of that we raised three children while
Oh,
doing it.
yeah, not to
And,
forget them.
so there's the balance of, the whole family
Exactly.
and work. And so I've kind of shifted to, instead of work-life balance, it's work-life integration. This concept is getting a lot of traction now. But it's true. And that speaks to, what I'm doing with the whole relationship marketing piece of the puzzle is that I don't need separation of work and personal life. Like I am the brand. I am me,
It's
right? And,
me.
and this is what I do and who I am, and the family is a part of it, and we enjoy it, we embrace it, and we just make it a part of who we are and what we do, regardless of where we are. But Sue, you talked. I made a bunch of notes there as you were talking, and the resilience piece is so huge. There's a great quote by Muhammad Ali. He says, "You don't lose the fight by getting knocked down. You lose the fight when you stay down." And that
Good
that is
point.
something that just resonates with me because we get knocked down all day, every day. Especially and my sales background helped me with that, right? And we talked before record that I've been in sales 25 years, but I hang my hat on the fact that I've never actually sold anything. I just take a needs-based, value-based approach to having meaningful conversations, asking questions that matter, listening to the answer, taking copious notes along the way, building the brand so that people know who I am, what I do, why it matters. And so when they're ready to make that buying decision, we've already laid the groundwork, right? I know them. I know what's important to them. They know me and what I can offer. And then, if we can merge in the middle and I have a product or service that can help them at that moment in their life, then fantastic. We have a deal. Is that sales? Yeah, I guess so.
Mm.
But the way that you don't fail in sales is you don't label it as sales.
Right,
You
right. Good
just
point. Yeah.
simply take that approach of, hey, this is who I am and I want to get to know you better, and this is how I could potentially help. And if you're ready, then we go from there. But yeah, the other piece I want to hit on, at your stage of the game and my stage of the game, we often get, well, it must be nice, right? Or everything's so great in our worlds, right? And you're so lucky, it must be nice. And they didn't see the 3, 4, 5 years early
Absolutely. Of
on.
groundwork. Of working hard, absolutely, and that is such a good point. Even though I didn't mean to interrupt, that is such a good
No,
point
you're good.
because it's, you look like a swan on the surface, you're a duck underneath because there's such a lot of work going into it, and people do use this word, and I'm not discounting it, but they say to you, "Oh, you're so lucky," and half of you wants to turn around and go, "Actually, no, I make my own luck."
That's
Because I
right.
work really hard for this. Yeah, good point.
Absolutely. And so my comeback to that now is, hey, I can show you the path that I took if you're interested. And I just offer them the same opportunity that I took. And I'm like, it will be 3 or 4, 5 years with no money and 10, 12 hour days and unlimited stress and things like that. But
Mhm.
if you can fight through that, then yes, you can get very lucky down the road.
Yeah, and that's really brilliant. And thank you. But it kind of, again, though, it contradicts some of the stuff which is being espoused now, which is the idea that, hey, if you find your passion, it's not going to be work. Well, actually, no, because it's still extremely hard work. I don't think there's any easy way to become successful from the point of view that unless, you're a lottery winner, there's just no quick way to short circuit from you have a really great idea, you need to start building good relationships, you need to then build on those relationships so they want to refer you. And then you need to systematize that somehow so that it's happening more naturally rather than organically, which is, one every month or something terribly slow, which really only grows it terribly slowly. So you've worked out in your own way a process, and it's not just about you, because obviously you've now got a very big business, so it can't be just about you doing that promotional bit of chatting. But it's not a formula. It's not formulaic as in, hey, you're always going to get asked these questions. It's building a relationship. And this is what you're talking about when you say there is no substitute for conversations.
Yeah, no doubt. I want to circle back around to what you mentioned earlier too, which is if I were to name one character trait that every successful executive, entrepreneur, solopreneur needs, it's the ability to delay gratification. And the tip I would give here is, yes, you need the 10,000 foot vision and you need the 5, 10, 20 year goal. But more importantly, you need the ability to not put yourself there yet and really just have a laser like focus on what's in front of you, which is today. And if
Got
you can
you.
have 1, 2, or 3 primary essential goals just for today, and I'm not talking a to-do list, this never ending, if I do it, great, if I don't, whatever. I'm talking like, come hell or high water, by 5 o'clock today, I'm going to at least get this and this done. And so whatever whirlwind occurs, you can always go back to that center focal point and have that focus on those 1 or 2 most essential goals. And it's so cliche to say, but it truly is one day at a time. And so if you prioritize your day around the most important thing, and just have that one main focus, and you have the ability to rinse and repeat, and just days become weeks and weeks become months, and before you know it, here we are 15 years later, and people are like, well, how did you build it? And they hate the answer because the answer is one day at a time, and that's not sexy. That's
Good
not
point.
easy. But
Good
but
point.
I think where people fail mentally, we talk about the mental game, is they put themselves in that 20-year goal mentally and feel like they should be there now. And they lose sight of the small wins, which is, hey, if I can just crush today and earn the right to come back to fight again for 8, 9, 10 hours tomorrow and crush that day, then you will get there. Right. But it really is just one day at a time. So I apologize. I didn't answer your question there, but I
No,
wanted
you
to
did. No,
touch on
you
that.
absolutely did. You did really, because I think what we're saying in so many words is, if I may repeat, there is no substitute for hard work. What you've being able to do is recognize that you're getting something right. This is the important bit. You're getting something right because people are coming back, or they're wanting to still purchase for you, or they're recommending other people to you. This is definitely a formula that's quite straightforward in life. You get something right. And then as you start to rinse, repeat, you grow beyond the amount that you yourself can service. So I would guess you also reached the tipping point where you said, okay, look, I'm going to need 2, 3, maybe even 4 or 5 people in the team. Did that happen fairly rapidly, or did you just grow quite organically?
It was organically, and it was this system. So to me, scaling a small business, and you work with larger businesses, maybe it's a little bit different, but for a small business owner, it's this process of just replacing yourself along the
Mm,
way. And so it really went from one employee when I opened, who I was paying off of a line of credit, to once I was able to earn enough that the business was earning enough revenue where now I could pay that employee without the line of credit. Then it was, all right, I'm going to replace my role with her and then bring on a new employee, and then pay that one off a line of credit until we get enough and to the point where now we're an organization of 12, which is, still very small, but 12 employees, that just kind of happen a little at a time. And so what I'm doing with the relationship marketing is the same formula. It's putting strategy and intentionality around the process of cultivating relationships, right? Building
mm,
meaningful relationships long term. And so what we do is we look at who are the small businesses. It doesn't have to be small, but just businesses in parallel markets to. So I'm an insurance. So who are the businesses in parallel markets who are already having conversations or doing business with our potential customers? So for me, it's people who are selling cars, it's realtors, it's mortgage brokers, it's attorneys, right? They're having conversations every day with the people we want to have conversations. And so I looked at it and I said, instead of trying to find 10,000 new prospects to have a conversation with, what if we find a couple hundred people who are already having conversations with 400 or 500 people a year that we want to talk to, and
right.
strategically, systematically show up with consistency, and you mentioned this earlier too, the consistency is key, um, in a meaningful way without asking for anything in return, just pouring value
Mm,
into
mm,
these people, right? So total contrarian. With referrals, it's always this, hey, I'll scratch my back if you scratch mine. It gets real kind of grimy and cringy sometimes. And so we're just looking at it from an opposite point of view where it's like, hey, Sue, what is going on with you? What's going on with your business? What are your goals? What are your struggles or obstacles? How can I potentially help you? Who do I know that I can introduce you to? So all I'm doing is looking to figure out how can I best serve Sue? And
mm,
I'm going to show up systematically every 4 weeks. And it might be a quick little email with a link to an article where, hey, I read this article and I thought of you. It might be a handwritten card. It could be we're connecting on social. It could be stopping by with a thoughtful gift, right? So we have this whole list in a CRM system, that we consistently take notes and we figure out 4 weeks from now what would be the best way to show up again in Sue's world. So it seems organic and natural, even though it's planned. And then over time, when Sue has a conversation with someone and insurance comes up, she's like, "Hey, you know who you should talk to," right?
right.
Because it's top of mind awareness, and so without even having to ask for an introduction, we receive thousands of introductions as a team of 12. We're all out there doing this with our own key relationship centers of influence in our community. And the problem is, and this goes back to what we are talking about earlier, this is not quick and easy. So building relationships, meaningful relationships, takes time. And so what I get
Mm.
from a lot of business owners is, well, yeah, I tried that. And I'm like, well, you tried it for how long, right? And how did you do it? Because it could be a year, year and a half, 2 years of consistent just showing up in Sue's world before she introduces me to someone. Or Sue may never do business with me or send someone to do business with me, but she may introduce me to someone else she knows who
Mm.
knows someone who then becomes one of my best referral sources. So it's this whole connection economy, and where people fall short more often than not is with the consistency piece of it.
Got you. And I think there's a couple of things that are also coming to mind. First of all, I've got this image of a kind of spider's web. In other words, you've got one touch point, think about the next touch point and the next touch point, and all of these matter. And I think the second observation really is what I call strategic partnerships. So you're not just connecting with the person to whom you directly promote something. Let's, for argument's sake, for the purposes of today, say sales. Yeah. But you're also connecting with partners who would actually be able to promote you to their database or client base for benefit to you. And I think sometimes it is having the wherewithal, which is a polite word for something else, meaning growing a pair, so that you go on the hunt for exactly this. And do you know what? This is in some ways, it's part of the difficulty. For one-man bands, they sometimes fail, if that's a tricky word, because they're just not quite proud enough of what they do or determined enough to promote what they do or convinced enough that it's going to fix a pain point. And to your point, you have to go find the pain point, not make an assumption. So let me give you a really quick example. I've spotted over the course of years of being a psychologist that whilst it is not my direct area of expertise, teens and teenagers are experiencing quite a lot of anxiety. I think they need a better toolkit for life. So I've called it Toolkit for Teens. I started a book and then I thought, right, I now need to start designing a training course for different levels of teenagers. But when I took it out there, bearing in mind, coming back to my point, I thought it was a good idea. The feedback I was actually getting is, no, you need to design the course for us as the users of the teens, meaning the businesses, because we need to know how to handle these slightly sanitized group of people who've come through COVID or otherwise so that we can capitalize or maximize what's good for them. And of course, now my brain is going, damn. So what I wanted to do versus what's really going to work. And that is a brave conversation you sometimes need to have.
So I don't know if you realize this, but we were kind of living in parallel spaces the last few years. So I wrote a book called The Essential F Words for Teens. And this was a book that was written for my son who graduated high school last year. And I said, hey, financially, we're okay. I sell life insurance. If I die, my family is going to be okay financially. Yeah. But there's a lot of stuff in the old man's head that I want my kids to know, right, as they enter adulthood, as they enter life. And I started jotting down all these notes and stories and bullet points, just things I wanted my son to know. Every morning, I spent about half an hour writing. And after months, I had about 300 pages of notes. And I'm like, I didn't set out to write a book, but I'm like, I've got a book. So now I'm knee deep in this book for teenagers about to transition into college or work or otherwise. And I said, well, what the hell do I know about being a teenager? It's been 3 decades since I've been there, right? And so I called my sister-in-law, who's a history teacher at a high school, and she teaches juniors, so primarily 16-year-old students. And I said, can I do a survey? And she said, sure. And I gave them 5 questions. And one of the questions was, what limiting self-beliefs are holding you back? And 103 students answered this question. And 88 of them, this will be no surprise to you, had some sort of negative inner critic, self-talk, self-doubt. I'm not good enough. I'm not smart enough. I'm not ready. I'm not worthy. These are 16-year-olds, right? And I was like, wow, we have a confidence crisis amongst our teenagers. And so I kind of set out to create a program. It's called Career After Classroom. I'm knee deep in it right now. That will help teenagers, not what to think. Schools are good at teaching them what to think. I want to teach them how to think. Critical thinking, discernment, mindset, a lot of the psychology stuff that we talked about. Resiliency, adaptability, reframing failure, right? Failure, use it as feedback, right? Doesn't mean you are a failure. It means that particular thing didn't work, which is okay. That's a good thing. So those little life lessons. So it's so funny. That's a whole aside.
Well done. Yeah, thank you.
Conversation that
you're right.
That we should
that's a parallel universe, isn't it? Really?
Yeah, we should probably talk outside of this and put our heads together going forward.
That's a really good point. I'm sorry to hear that, Rolly, so many of them have this negative inner critic, but you can probably know that, I'm not entirely surprised, because I think there's an unhealthy percentage of them who struggle to come through COVID intact. because they just weren't spending enough time with their peers. But then you and I would laugh that there's also an unhealthy percentage of them that overly rely on everything they can read on their flipping phones. So in some ways, really, that was never the relationship building aspect of it that we had wanted them as adults to to understand anyway. So I do think they're in a different world than my world was, which didn't have a phone in it. Never mind, this over reliance on social media and so forth. So, but you are spot on. Now, I think going back to you and what you've managed to build, although you're saying there's only 12 people, you have built a really great business. It's very well regarded. You've got, you're coming on podcasts, you've got a TEDx talk under your belt. This is really great stuff. And one of the areas which interested me that you have also got a course on that you've just been doing fairly recently is this idea of what you've called real talk. And it's this concept that difficult conversations have to be had with that same client base sometimes. If you put your prices up, if it's tricky because they're maybe not right for you, I'm making guess here, but there's stuff which we sometimes need to get brave. Now, I'm interested. How did you find that? How well did it go?
Yeah, it's actually one of we threw it out there because it's a difficult season in a lot of different industries, and I'm speaking from an America standpoint. I don't know if this is a global thing,
Same here.
but post COVID, we're going through a lot of domino effect situations, right? One thing has led to another, and here we are 4 years later, and it's this new normal, I guess, and everyone keeps saying that these are wild times. They're not wild times. They're just the times. And we need to have some real conversations around it. And so we did a 1 hour webinar and just threw it out to our group and the insurance agents in the industry, and it was like 10x the results of anything we've ever done before. People were just signing up in droves to be able to hear this content. And it goes back to, the idea that we don't sell anything, right? That we're just real talk, right? Just educational, like let's not sugarcoat it, but let's also not be negative about it, because it's so easy to fall into that negative in the weeds, trap. That's the easy road, right? And so we're constantly, I talk about this all the time, all day, every day, we're coming to crossroads where we have to make a decision. Are we going to go where the masses go and get what the masses get? Or are we going to choose to be a little bit different, even though it's difficult? Right? And where it's difficult right now is, yes, we can acknowledge that there's real problems, real difficult situations, but there's always a silver lining and there's always an opportunity. And that's where we're taking this thing. So really the approach to this is, you may not like the answer of the situation, but it's the truth and it's the hand we've been dealt, right? And so deep breath. And now let's look at it from a different lens, because oftentimes when you're trapped in the bottle, you can't read the label and we get stuck in there. And so we've got this community of peers that are challenging one another to look at situations in different ways with new perspective, keep it positive, and how do you go forward? Because as you've been through many business cycles. The people who will win in the coming years are the ones who are doing the work right now while it's difficult. Back.
It's got to be done, isn't it? This bounce back thing, which we now sort of colloquially refer to as resilience, because this concept of being able to bounce back means that on some sort of level, I've got to get constructive. I'm very much like you've shared today. I'm really key on this language thing. So it's the way you talk to yourself and the way you talk to other people that is really going to pivot whatever it is that you've got to say. And I think if you find yourself being in any way critical, so critical of the government, this is never going to work, because particularly for yourself, there's just so much going on in the US right now. And obviously Republicans, Democrats, it's like, and how do you know? You could step onto somebody's toes, even though you're only having an innocent conversation, or you've just blurted that you support X, Y, or Z, and it's not a good idea. It's much the same over here. So stay away from the stuff which is obviously going to cause offense or risk it, and just come down to the basics of, we need to be able to make a decision that constructively supports how to get the best out of this situation. You got to get your language right. It's rather that than being critical about it. I'm sorry, but we need to talk about it. You can't do that.
Yeah, and the self-talk, right? The language of how we talk about ourselves, we do it on autopilot and don't even realize. And that's why it's so important to have accountability partners that are keenly aware of this as well, so they can call you out on, when you say things like, oh, these things only happen to me, or if it wasn't for bad luck, I'd have no luck at all. Or, it of course, this, so we catch it. And I catch myself doing it, sometimes where I'm like, ooh, that's negative self-talk. Like, and
yeah.
we create this pattern, and then, the thoughts in our head become the things in our life. And it's what we believe to be true about ourselves, even though it's not. And so surrounding yourself with the right people. I was on a podcast recently, and it ended with the host said, if you could put any message on a billboard, what would it be? And I said, just surround yourself with greatness.
With greatness.
If you're the smartest person in the room, you need to find a new room. Just find people who have been to the places you want to be, have done the things you want to do, and start modeling their behavior and their habits, and
And I think that's brilliant, and thank you. And I would piggyback on that with the fact that, if you don't have all of the answers, you'd be amazed at the fact that there's pretty much so much information out there. It's unlikely there's a single thing you are going through that somebody else hasn't actually been through before you. So I would say go on the hunt, be hungry for information, be hungry to learn. And there's an amazing, just like you've done over your books, there's an amazing shortcut that's out there that if you just read it, you just take it on board, you can get through whatever it is that you're mired in right now. And I think that's terribly healthy and really important. Now, I know that we're obviously going to be putting quite a few bits in your podcast notes, but let's just make sure I let everybody know. So your website is agencyoptimization.com?
So that's the insurance training consulting. Probably the best way to connect with me is my personal website, which is my name, scottgreats.com.
Great.
And then the big push right now, we've got the Referrals Done Right book, which is in pre-sales. It will be released to the masses August 13th, and that's referralsdonerightbook.com.
Great. So they can actually get that from a separate website. And would that also be on some of the main platforms like Amazon and so on?
All of them. Yeah. Barnes & Noble and Books A Million and Amazon and Target and wherever you buy books.
Well done. So I know that some people will really, really enjoy that, and the rest you should. So, this is really, it's good stuff because, when someone's been through as much as you, there's such a lot of intellectual property in there. And this is what I'm talking about today, Rolly. You can shortcut that by just picking up a book, by just being keen to learn, just by listening to a podcast, which gives you some nuggets. And that's what we've done today. Scott, I really can't thank you enough. It's been a pleasure talking to you. Let's make sure this isn't the only time you come on the show.
All right. Hey, if you invite me, I'm back.
Thank you so much for your time. That's been great.
Thank you, Sue.
That was Scott Greats there, who was talking to us about his own background and his process for being able to scale his business, and very much through hard-won work, and also this whole process of being able to strengthen relationships with clients and indeed with strategic partnerships, which I hope you picked up there. So there's clearly a process at play. He learned it the hard way, but he's passing it on to you through his books. So please do go on the hunt for those. You can find them both on his website, www.scottgreats.com, but also you can find the one which is currently in pre-sale version, is coming up very soon, and it's going to be available on all of the major platforms. So I do hope that you enjoyed that. I've said this before, but we have some really great guests, and there's clearly quite a considerable amount of alignment with the fact that he's also looking at the teenagers and stuff that they need, and that's very much in my heart. So take care, everybody. It's been a joy again, and I'll be in touch very soon. Bye for now.